Good afternoon and welcome to another program in the series of building the DJH 2MT260 kit. This one. Okay, so last time we built a pair of articulated coupling rods, and they're essential for doing the next stage of this part of the kit, which is building the chassis. Now, I didn't really explain the last time why I jumped away from doing the body and jumped to doing the chassis. The reason that I did do this is because there are no injectors in the kit. Now, I've bought some injectors from Ragstone Models, and you really need the chassis to be fitted to the body before you do this particular bit of scratch building, because all the pipe work is necessary and you don't want the pipe work to interfere with the wheels and the motion indeed. So I've got to the stage with the body where I could start doing the pipe work, and rather than sort of do a bit and then leave it incomplete, I've decided to go on and do the chassis. So that's the reason why I've done it. It's not in order, but it's a logical thing to do next. So if you remember the last time I showed you that the chassis is two quite substantial pieces of brass etching, and what I've done is there are two methods of joining the chassis together included. Now, you can use both, or you can ignore what I've done here, which is use the two cylindrical turned chassis joiners and the shouldered M2 screws to actually hold it together. Now, I've done it this way because it is good to have the chassis sort of fixed but not have all the bits in between sort of encumbering where you're working. So the other thing that I've done is, if you noticed, I've cut out for the horn blocks. So these are the bits that were cut out. It is marked, and like I said, rather than buy another complete set of horn blocks, I had 4 horn blocks left over from a Q6, a T2080. So what I've done, these are the bits that I've cut out. They are marked. I cut them out using a Dremel and a diamond slitting disc. This is the diamond slitting disc. The reason I used it is that it is a lot narrower than a normal slitting disc. Now, if you're experienced at doing this, you may have a particular way of doing it. A way that I've heard is using a piercing saw or something such similar, but it's the way I do it. So you just cut down. There is a risk of you marking the cosmetic springs, but once it's all up and painted and everything, that won't be too obvious. Now, I've fitted 2 bearings in the rear position, just soldered them in using gas torch, and that gives me a datum point for doing the rest of this. The other thing that I've done is I've made up my Slater's horn blocks. These are the brass horn blocks. They do come with a sort of an instruction sheet if you want to go down this route. There's an exploded diagram on the back, but it is essential that if you're going to do this method, that you solder the keep plate on top, the plate that's got the little cup in it where the springs go. Because if you don't, and you do it. The horn block will not sit at the correct height when it's when the horn is in the horn block, and it's essential if you want your chassis to be level that it's got all the bits fitted, even though it's 0.5 millimetre or so. It is very important these are fully soldered up before you assemble them. Another thing that I've done is on the instructions, the spacer, these are the spacer plates for the chassis. These are the other type. These are the etched ones which fit in slots in the bigger pieces. A number of these have to be tapped M2 for fixing the motion bracket, the cylinders, but there's also an omission in the instructions which you need to think about now, and that is the rear spacer. Now this is the rear spacer for the chassis, the very last spacer, and there's actually 5 folds in it to get it in place. What it doesn't say in the instructions, I don't know if you can see, this top plate has got 2 holes in it now. Those holes are for fixing the body to the chassis. They fit, there's the body, they fit in, there's 2 holes. If I hold it, the sun's come out. These 2 slotted holes there, 2 screws go through there, 2 M2 screws go through there, and they hold the cab end of the body to the chassis. They are not in the instructions listed or shown in the instructions, but they also need to be tapped M2. So what I've done is I've, having made a number of these DJH kits before, it's better to give it a bit more material for you to create the thread against. So what I've done is I've just soldered scrap bits of etch. There's plenty of etch in the various parts. This bit would be particularly suitable. That's a bit thin. These bits are okay if you can fit them in, but what it does is it basically doubles the thickness up of the material, so when you use your tap on it you get a better thread and there's more for the screws to grip, and that will make a little bit, well, more than make a little bit of difference, it will make quite a bit of difference to the way that the kit goes together, because there's less danger of you accidentally stripping the threads when you do the screws up. There's also 2 holes in the front of the chassis there and there, therefore 2 countersunk M2 bolts which hold the cylinders against the side. So there's 2 bolts on the top which hold the cylinders down, and then there's 2 that hold the cylinders from the side. They're not listed either, they're just shown as holes. They also need to be drilled and tapped M2 when you get to it. So I've made a note on the instructions. I went round and checked for M2 holes. You need to drill the holes out 1.6 millimeters, and I've also made a note at the bottom for the Slater's pickup housing, the plastic housings for the Slater's pickups. They need to be drilled 3.8 millimeters, but you can get away with 4 millimeters is okay. You can either do, most drill sets come with a 3.5 or even a 3.8 drill in. And you can use that, or you can use a 3.5 and use a reamer to get it out, or you can drill it 4 millimeters. That should be okay. 0.1 of a millimeter all the way around will be okay. So having done all that, I will now reposition the camera get my workplace thing. I've got the light here. This is the light that I used last week. I've got that light ready, and I'll reposition the camera, and we'll go about fitting the horn blocks and getting a level chassis. Okay, so welcome back, and we're going to try and get a nice level chassis. So as I mentioned in the previous program, the reason that we made the coupling rods first is so that we could use these. Now this is a horn block alignment jig, or a chassis alignment jig, but you can use it as a horn block alignment jig. And what it is, it's a piece of 3/16 aluminium with 2 turn tapers on the end, and the coupling rods fit over the taper. So we have our datum point, which is the rear one, so that fits through quite nicely. What we'll do is we will use, because my board is not level, but the cutting board is level, so there's no rock there. So, and it's upside down, so it's easier to do it with it upside down because you've got to stop for the horn blocks. So we'll assemble up 2 of our horn blocks. So we've got 2 assembled horn blocks here, and then we'll take and if you notice, I've got a spring which sits between. Yeah, that's not going to work very well because I left the springs in place. All right, let's start again. So we'll fit the horn block in place, 1 in place, like that. And we'll put the spring through. Of course, now it all falls apart when you're trying to do it, but don't worry about it. It's so when you do this, you might actually discover that you need 5 hands. It is a little bit tricky. Okay, so there is the first one fitted, and the spring pushes outwards, and that holds the horn blocks in place. So don't worry too much about alignment yet. I've dropped one of the bars on the floor, so just bear with me. Now you can use things like blue tack and everything to hold these in place, but I haven't got any to hand, so that's rather a academic point. Almost there, almost there. Okay. So there are the 2 moving horn blocks, and we'll just manage to avoid it going on the floor. So we put the 3rd one in for the fixed axle, and then turn it the right way up so we get the coupling rods correct. So there's one coupling rod. And then the other one. And there's the other one. Now you can see from that, because the coupling rods fit over the extensions of the alignment jigs, they're all in line. The next problem that you have is that you want to look at them from the side, preferably without them falling apart, and making sure that they're level. So that side is level. We'll just check this side quickly. So look at them, look at it down the end, look at it from the side, and that looks okay. So what we can do now is tack solder the horn blocks to the frames. So just make sure that they're vertical. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that now. So what we'll do is we'll tack solder the 4 horn blocks in place, and then we can check it a little bit better. So I'll just wait for the soldering iron timed out. We're only going to tack solder them because if we need any fine adjustment, we can do that much easier if there's only a small joint to overcome. Okay, so those horn blocks are tack soldered in place. So we'll just have another look. And when you look from the side, what you want to make sure is that the coupling rod is straight. So that side is okay, and that side is okay. So that's good. So we'll remove these, the springs, and we will solder all the way around. We're happy. Right, I think we're going to have to use the gas torch on these. So we'll just use the gas torch. We'll just put a little bit of solder on. Right, so we'll use the gas torch, which is here. Try not to melt the cutting board. Okay, so they're roughly soldered in place now. Right, I'll just go around with the soldering iron and finish them off, and then I'll come back and we'll fit the frame spacers. Okay, welcome back. So I've soldered the horn blocks all the way around and cleaned up inside the frames. So what we'll do now is we'll move on to fixing the frame spacers. Now this particular frame spacer is the frame spacer for the motion bracket, and it goes in the middle here. So there are two holes in it for fixing the motion bracket too, and this is an M2 tap. So we'll tap that M2 because unlike all the other ones, you won't be able to get to it when you have soldered it in place. So we'll just tap that M2. Just check the other side. So that's done. Now we want a nice crisp edge to our fold, so we'll use the hold and fold out the bottom drawer. So now we'll do it over here. We've got a nice right angle bend. And then what we'll do then is we will slightly loosen, not completely, but we'll loosen it on both sides. And then that should slide down. And we'll do it up again. Okay, so that's the first frame spacer. We'll solder that in place. The only thing I'll say about this bit is if you've done my method and thickened the part for where you put the tap, be careful when you solder it that it doesn't come undone. Actually, it's better on the back. In fact, it's better not at all. So what I'm saying is this bit here, the bit where it goes down inside the chassis, don't solder that in place at the top, because that's where the motion bracket is going to go, and it's a double thickness nickel silver etching, so if you have too much solder at the top it won't fit. I'm going to have to use the torch again. Yeah, we'll use the gas torch again. Should be enough residual heat to finish that bit off. Yeah. So there it is. It's level on the top, and I've not soldered it at the top on the outside so that the bracket will fit the motion bracket. So the next one will be the rear one, and as I mentioned, there are 5 folds in this one. So folds are always on the inside, with DJH kits unless they tell you otherwise. So this is the rear frame spacer, and it's quite a complex shape. And again, we'll loosen 2 screws. And try and fold it around. So, in fact, we might have to remove the rear one totally. Let's give it a bit more room. Help if we get it the right way up. Right, doesn't quite fit. Okay, we need to adjust these tabs a little bit. Yeah, the tabs are not fitting because of the etching cusps, but the etching cusps are going to be quite difficult to remove, so we'll, because the slot's quite small, so it's probably easier to adjust the tabs. And it is easier to adjust the tabs. And there's the rear spacer, and we'll solder that in place using the same method as we did the other one. What we'll do is we'll turn the soldering up a little bit. See if that makes it easier. No, we're going to have to use the gas torch again. And what we're going to do with the rear spacer, the turned one, is we're actually going to solder that in place and remove the screws if we can. That's one screw. And there's the other one, that works okay. And then we will fit we'll fit a ring, one of these etched rings, one off this fret probably. We'll fit one over either side just to disguise the hole. Once it's painted, it won't be noticeable. If you're wondering where I get these from, these come from 4D Models up in London. They do an etched sheet with all the different size squares and circles etched on them. I've had this one for ages, as you can see. So, right, so we'll got the wrong one. Right, so there's two. We'll clean those up and fit them off camera. When I come back, oh, sorry, I'll do this one next. This is the front spacer which the cylinder's attached to. Again, it's a complex shape. So we'll just fold this one up and just check it off again. And this one should fit without any bother. Just ease it in. In fact, what we'll do, we'll reduce the tabs a little bit. Okay, so I've just roughly done the front spacer, and I'll go around and do that with the gas torch off camera. When we come back, we'll try it out. We'll see if it works. Okay, welcome back, and we've done the chassis. We've removed all the screws for the cylindrical spacers. I mean, you can leave them in place, but they will show up when it's painted. But it's a choice that you've got. You can either remove the screws, remove the spacers, solder the spacers in place, or leave them as the kit manufacturer intended. So there's our chassis. Needs a little bit more cleaning up, but we'll do that later. What we're going to do now is we're going to do the wheels. So these are standard Slater's wheels. There's an instruction leaflet in with the wheels if you're not familiar. And what we're going to do is we're just going to do it roughly. We're not going to do it for keeps. So we will use what is in the packets. We won't do anything fancy at this stage, because we just want to see if it goes round. So that's the first one. Okay. So welcome back, and this will be the last bit because it's extremely dark outside. I'll turn the light off so you can see how dark it is. That's how dark it is. So this will be the last bit. This will be the last bit. So what I've done is I've fitted the wheels and the coupling rods and just done the wheels roughly, and as you can see, well, that is pretty good. There, I'll rock it with my knees. There we go. One thing that is obviously evident from doing this stage is that there's quite a large gap between the horn blocks and the backs of the wheels, which will need washers. Slater's make washers specifically for that job, and I've got a couple of frets, and what we'll do is we'll pack that out. So with that, I'm very pleased with that. I'm not quite pleased with that, I'm very pleased with that. And that's a good basis for making sure that the rest of the chassis works. If the chassis is free running with no binding, then you know that you're going to have a relatively easy part to do the next bit. So thank you for watching, and please watch out for the next programs coming soon.